Magneto and Hyperion kill the Marvel Universe. This story is amazing. So this basically opens up with the death of Storm. Little bit of explanation here. So this takes place in a story called Exiles. And in effect, the Exiles are a team of various superheroes from different realities who have been brought together, and they travel the multiverse, quote unquote, fixing different universes. Usually it involves them just killing people, right? But the fact remains that every time a member of the Exiles dies, a new person is sent in to replace them, and you never know who that person is gonna be. You don't know if it's gonna be like an alternate version of Magneto or Cyclops, Wolverine, or something like that. We end up finding out the person that's been sent in here is King Hyperion. We're not gonna get his origin story in this video, but this guy's origin is amazing because he basically killed everybody in his own universe. It's pretty dope, but he's like the closest you get to Superman in Marvel Comics. The fact is, in this new universe that they've been sent to, basically all the X-Men are dead, and pretty much all the superheroes are dead, because Magneto had incited a war between humanity and the mutant population. And in fact, you end up switching to Asteroid M, which historically speaking in Marvel Comics is kind of a base of operations that Magneto's used on and off again before its eventual destruction in the main Marvel Universe. And in effect, what he's doing here in talking to Pietro, of course, Quicksilver, as you guys know him, as well as Forge, who, despite having all this history and all that kind of cool stuff, is basically the X-Men's version of Tony Stark, right, in terms of what he can do. That between all of them working together, just the few mutants that are left in existence here, they're basically taking this massive Earth-killing asteroid and firing it at Earth, right? Like to literally wipe out all life on the planet. And a lot of it's just because Magneto is just being a dick, if we're being honest. And it's one of these things where Quicksilver actually tells him, like, there's still some mutants left on Earth, right, that we're just now picking up. Of course, some of them are the Exiles, and some of them are also other mutants that are in hiding that humanity doesn't know about, that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But where the question's asked of Magneto, like, do we want to go and grab them? His response, no. Just end it now. Leave Xavier and his brood to die among the humans they insisted on protecting, the same Neanderthals who hated them so. Charles was given every opportunity to join us, to destroy humanity by our side, but he refused me and died by their hand, as I always said he would. We'll destroy the humans, and the mutants stupid enough to stand beside them all deserve the same fate. So it's one of these crazy things because at that moment, you switch over to Spider. Now, Spider's cool, man. He's basically a version of Peter Parker from an alternate universe who was a mass murderer. He was sentenced to 67 consecutive life sentences, but he's basically an alternate version of Peter Parker who got the Carnage symbiote. It's really cool because like all he wants to do is destroy stuff. And so you kind of have a moment of a reprieve where like the characters kind of like hang out, right? Like Carol Danvers is just like totally smitten with Hyperion. Like she comes on to him and she's like, hey, like you want to touch naughty bits? And he's like, sure, I guess, right? So like the two of them start going at it. And then like when they get done, she's like wanting to have pillow talk and Hyperion's like, hey, do you want to play the airplane game? And she's like, what's that? And he's like, well, you take off. It's just one of those things. Guy doesn't want to have anything to do with her, right? But then you end up finding out that they're both being watched by this universe's version of Kitty Pryde, which is kind of creepy. But she was basically in hiding from like Sentinels who had shown up here and basically started eradicating all the different X-Men. Of course, Colossus shows up on the scene, but again, this is Colossus as part of the Exiles team. He's not from this universe. So they've basically been sent here to eradicate all the mutants on this planet, including Magneto. That's the actual charge of their mission as it was given to them by the Time Broker. The Time Broker in the whole Exiles mythos is like this guy who exists out there, seemingly beyond space and time or at the very end of all things. You do find out who he is, and there is a whole story behind it, but I'm not gonna tell you guys in case you all end up wanting me to cover the Exiles comics, which are really, really good, if I'm being honest, and we'll probably end up seeing them in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because of the multiverse saga. But it's one of those things where like, because that's the mission that's been given to them, Hyperion's like, no, we're not gonna kill anybody. He's like, instead, we're gonna take over this world. We're literally going to enslave what's left of the human race, if there's anything left at all, Magneto's left anybody at all, and then we're just gonna take over the entire world unto ourselves. Now, a lot of that is kind of predicated on the unknown origin of Hyperion at that point in time. Later on in the series, with issue number 65, you end up finding out that he literally killed everybody in his own universe up to and including Galactus, right? Like, they're all gone. But eventually, like, Earth gets nuked by what few humans are left, hoping to destroy him. And then basically he's just like there as part of a empty radiated husk of a planet where he's whisked away by the Time Broker and brought onto the Exiles. So yeah, I guess we basically covered his origin in this video, but the fact remains here, right? Like, there's no concern from Magneto or any of those guys. More so than that, Vision, of course, being an android and really following the orders of the Time Broker to a T, overhears the conversation of Hyperion and tries to overrule him, at which point Hyperion just incinerates this guy on the spot, right? And is like, does anybody else want to argue? Like, does anybody else want to debate with me? And everybody's just kind of like, no, not really. Because one of the big things that you guys will realize is that these differing variations of the characters that we know, in a lot of ways, lack pretty much all the moral fortitude of traditional superheroes. I wouldn't go so far as to call them cowards, but I would say they don't really function the same way that we're used to. And so what's really cool about this is that following this whole statement, it's like, okay, let's do the thing. And then at the same time, like, the asteroid is fired from asteroid M and is on a collision course for Earth where it will collide and eradicate all life on the planet within 24 hours. At that point, you switch over to Washington, DC. And what you end up finding out is that it wasn't simply just the mutant population on Earth that was destroyed in this war that Magneto incited. It was also like pretty much all the Avengers. Iron Man's dead, Ant-Man's dead, Daredevil's dead, presumably Black Bolt's dead because he and humans suck. I mean, why wouldn't they die? But the fact is, like, all these different superheroes have all been killed off. But then you have a guy who just comes running in, talking to like the higher ups in Washington, and it's like, okay, Magneto did it. He fired the asteroid. We've got 24 hours. While that's going on, you transition to the Pentagon and you end up finding out that the Sentinel program is alive and well. And while the Sentinels were responsible for destroying a good portion of the superheroes on Earth, they don't currently have a way to get to Magneto on asteroid M. So they're basically building a sort of spaceborne prototype of Sentinel that can get to asteroid M and then basically either obliterate the asteroid itself because Magneto can't really breathe in space for too long, certainly not enough to get himself back to Earth, or they can somehow use their non-metallic properties to invade the asteroid and then destroy Magneto. The kicker about all this is that you have Hyperion and his guys who show up at the Pentagon and just start incinerating and blasting all these Sentinels to pieces. They literally come out of nowhere, right? Now, Carol Danvers, ever smitten with Hyperion, right, and just unable to take a hint, is just like following him around like a lost puppy dog. And so like she's getting attacked by these Sentinels and she's like, hey, like, can you help me for a second? And he's just like, I'm busy. I've got more important things to do than deal with the whims and wants of a girl who can't take a hint and does not realize she's not Mrs. Right. She's just Mrs. Right now. And so it's one of those things where he's just kind of like, you know, whatever. So like he ends up just letting these Sentinels attack her, which of course it doesn't kill Carol Danvers, but what he does do is he hits the main core and that actually shuts down all the Sentinels. Then he chastises Carol Danvers, right? And he's just like, you need to learn to think bigger, right? Like the reality here is, sure, I could have gone after those Sentinels that were attacking you, but by attacking the main core, their power source is gone. They can't function anymore, which includes the ones that are attacking you. So literally Sentinels just start falling out of the sky. Now, the government doesn't know what to do in response to this. They have no clue what's going on. Even the X-Men, or I guess the Exiles, don't really even know what's going on. But they do come to the realization quite readily that Hyperion did exactly what he said he was going to do, which was basically eliminate the entirety of the Sentinel threat. Because one of the things to keep in mind here is that with this future or this universe functioning the way that it is, it really would just turn into Days of Future Past, where the Sentinels themselves become self-aware, and then they in turn just start mass producing themselves by thousands, right? You know, some base 10 number, right? You know, 20,000 Sentinels, you know, or, you know, 1 million Sentinels that just exist across the world, where the numbers are just too overwhelming for any superheroes that may be left. Following that, they end up basically making their way to what's called Storm City. And Storm City is literally the last refuge for any and everybody who is trying to survive this war between the human population and the mutant population, in the sense that they operate under the protection of Storm. But the other cool thing about this is that Hyperion emerges from the White House and basically declares the president, right, this guy's dead and gone. Like, there is no more president of the United States anymore. Not only that, he's met by the arrival of Magneto. Now, the kicker about this, right, is that Hyperion says, this world is mine now, Magneto. I will protect it from whatever threat you think you might pose. The response to Magneto, I have launched an asteroid which is now plummeting towards the surface of the Earth. I came here to offer you an opportunity for salvation with us in space. But I see now that you might prefer to rule over the ashes of a dead world. Reconsider and join us, your genetic equals, or remain and die. The choice is yours. And so like Hyperion just kind of looks at him for a second and then smirks, right? Because this guy could easily withstand a planet-killing asteroid. He says, and I offer your brotherhood a choice. Stop the asteroid, save my planet, and remain with me, or die. And so it's just one of those things where it's like, get him, right? Like Magneto sends his guys after Hyperion. Now in that moment, right, we transition back over to Storm City where you've got Gambit and these other members of the Exiles as well as Kitty Pryde, and they're met by the Vanisher. Now the Vanisher is a very old character in Marvel Comics. In fact, he's one of the first early villains that the X-Men fought when the X-Men were introduced to Marvel Comics itself. He's basically a teleporter. He's not really a teleporter that can go to like any distance or any range. He is relatively limited, but he is the method to get in and out of Storm City. If you were to just like walk up on it and try to enter into it, that would never happen, right? Like you would literally be incinerated by just the field of power that Storm's emanating around this place. Not only that, once you switch back to Magneto and Hyperion, they have this kind of standoff going on. Wolverine is sent in, and Wolverine is made to understand his place in the bigger picture. Because literally, like Hyperion says, I don't want to kill your minions, Magneto. I just want to kill you. And Wolverine's just like, the road to him leads through me. The response of Hyperion, fine. And he just incinerates Wolverine on the spot. And Magneto is just kind of a little flabbergasted. Mystique doesn't know what to say because she's just like, dude, that guy was indestructible. And so Magneto's just like, attack him, right? Like, Rogue, Iceman, deal with this guy. And they're just kind of like, I mean, you know, look, I mean, this dude killed Wolverine, and here's the thing, man, like, reconsider, right? I mean, you know, let's stop the asteroid and then we can rule the world, right? I mean, you know, that kind of a thing, right? So like, they're basically just kind of like, I'm not fighting that guy, right? Like that's not going to happen. And so literally the forces of Magneto are just kind of dissipating and disappearing around him, right? Mystique is seemingly the only one left. So the response of Hyperion, stop the asteroid or I will implode your head. And Magneto's response is to lash out at Hyperion. And so literally in this moment, he says, I will tear your heart out. The iron in your blood will boil through your skin. The response of Hyperion, I am not of this earth, not of any earth, and my blood contains no iron. He incinerates Mystique on the spot, destroys Magneto's ship, grabs Magneto, and flies him into space. He says, give up this garbage and face the inevitable, Magneto. You cannot defeat me. And where Magneto responds in saying, everyone has an Achilles heel, the response of Hyperion, only Achilles had an Achilles heel. I cannot be stopped. And so he just tells him, like, stop this asteroid and maybe I'll care what you have to say. But Magneto refuses, right? He just declines the offer. He will not stop the asteroid. Even when Hyperion says, stop the asteroid, Magneto, or I'll toss your pieces across the globe, Magneto just says no. And so Hyperion kills him on the spot. And then at that point, it's just Hyperion facing this asteroid as this thing comes crashing into Earth. Now, jumping back to Storm City in Colorado, when the Exiles show up, Storm immediately just kisses Gambit, just because of the fact that in this reality, Storm and Gambit were basically in love. This is an alternate version of that Gambit, but still, she wasn't really able to say goodbye to her Gambit, so it kind of helps her to get past this as best she can. More so than that, the whole idea of like the asteroid heading towards Earth, in a lot of ways, Storm just doesn't want to leave. And the the reason why is because she promised the people here safety. And the reality is she can't get them all off of this place. Even Vanisher is just like, I don't know if I have the ability to teleport all these people to Asteroid M in time in order for them to survive. There's a better than fair chance most are going to die here. And so Storm's response, then I will die with them, right? That's basically it. And so what you get is Hyperion showing up on the scene with Rogue, who he probably did the dirty with at some point, and literally says like, this is our plan, right? Rogue has the ability to siphon people's powers. What Rogue and I are gonna do is we're gonna go to the asteroid, we're going to destroy this thing, and then we're going to conquer this world, and the world will become mine. That's something that I hope you're noticing here, is he keeps saying like, mine, I'm going to conquer the world, I will be the ruler of Earth. The exiles are kind of looking at it, you know, they're hearing him say that, and it's like, yes, I mean, obviously he means us, so like, we are going to rule the world, and that kind of a thing. No, because this guy absolutely loses his mind, right? It goes nuts here in a minute. And so what ends up happening is when Rogue touches him, right, that Vanisher uses his powers to teleport everybody to Asteroid M, right? And so it's just Rogue and it is Hyperion who are left behind. She touches this guy, absorbs his powers, and then just kind of realizes just how capable he is. Now, this is an important thing to grasp here because this introduces the idea, at least at this point in time when the story was written, outside of Avengers Annual number 10, I guess, where she touched Thor and then became worthy, that like she can basically duplicate the powers of anybody, even if they're not a mutant, right? Carol Danvers, Miss Marvel kind of solidified that, right? But it's one of those things where it's kind of hit and miss. It just sort of stacks on the idea that this is possible. And so essentially, like, of course, you know, Quicksilver is kind of dealt with readily and Forge is dealt with readily because, you know, they're both still there on Asteroid M. But for the main asteroid itself, Hyperion and Rogue are blasting this thing with their vision. And the idea is to break it into smaller pieces so that the massive piece won't crash into Earth and obliterate everything, right? The smaller pieces will cause a lot of damage, but at the end of the day, the Earth will survive and everything will more or less be okay for those who could survive the whole thing. What's crazy about this is that, as you guys know, when Rogue absorbs powers, it only works for a certain amount of time. So Hyperion's powers start wearing off. And she was like, reach for me, I need a recharge. And he's just like, no. And he's like, it's pointless. So he just leaves. He just leaves this girl to die. She's incinerated by the asteroid, and that's it, because this thing comes crashing down into the planet. And because of Magneto's actions, everybody on Earth is basically eradicated. The entirety of Earth's population is destroyed. So all that's left of the human and mutant population is what's on Asteroid M. That's it. And so you basically pick up with Colossus and Kitty Pryde, who are looking to try to find a way to get back to Earth, potentially survive, right? If there's some kind of a bunker they can get to, I don't know why it would make sense to get back to Earth. They just kind of panic and it's like, get us to an escape pod. But the reality is like Hyperion shows back up again and he's like, nope, now we're gonna complete the mission. And so he literally goes to try to kill Kitty Pryde. Colossus jumps in the way. He punches this guy through the ship itself, right? Literally punches a hole through the thing. Kitty Pryde goes with him, so they both suffocate out in space. And then you have him showing up. He goes after Gambit, right? He grabs Forge, throws Forge through a hole in the side, right? So Forge is dead now. Iceman patches the hole up, but then he goes after Quicksilver and kills Quicksilver on the spot. He literally just starts massacring everybody, right? Like Peter Parker, Spider Carnage, kills Vanquisher by stabbing him through the chest. And even when Gambit tries to go after this guy, right, like him and Storm basically end up getting Vanisher out of there as fast as they can, because while he's not able to like teleport them to a whole different location, he is able to teleport them seemingly just out of the room. But in the midst of all that, the Incredible Hulk and Firestar from an alternate reality appear here. Now, contrary to what you might think, they're not here to fight Hyperion, or at least not yet. They're here because they're replacing the people who have died. The Colossus is dead and Vision is dead. And so they're here to take their places. And so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, now we basically deal with the mission, right? Like we start killing all the mutants that are left here. Now, what's crazy is because Storm's lost everything of value to her, she basically asked Gambit to help her end all her living, which he does, right? It's really more of a mercy thing than anything else. But it's done out of love, because while neither of them have spent any meaningful time together and neither of them are truly in love, this version of Gambit had fallen in love with a different version of Storm. And this version of Storm had fallen in love with a different version of Gambit. And so through those relationships they had, they do respect and care about each other enough to allow this to happen, right? For Gambit to go through with it. And he's actually struggling pretty hard because he loses yet another Storm, right? Another woman that he could have potentially had a life with. And then like Hyperion shows up and starts making fun of him while he's grieving. He was like, you know, I knew you'd come around, Gambit. You're just too sensible, man. It's pretty brutal, right? It's pretty hardcore. But because of the fact that they are working for the Time Brokers, that Gambit, along with everybody else, are teleported away to their next mission. Meanwhile, everybody who was here, all the humans on Earth, all the mutants that remained, they're all dead. Literally, because of the actions of Magneto, and by extension, the actions of Hyperion, the entirety of the Marvel Universe was killed. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Let me know what you think about Exiles down in the comments section, and I will catch you all later. Peace.